everyone, my name is Lindsay. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Today I would like to share a story with you, and this story is how I felt God's calling on my life to be in ministry. So we're going to go back quite a fair way in my history. First of all, I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, so both my parents were Seventh-day Adventists when they met, and I was born into a home that believes like that, and I grew up going to church. And when I was about 12 years old, maybe 11 or 12, my parents started to encourage me to maybe do Bible studies with our pastor and consider getting baptized sometime soon. And I think that was a really good thing that they did that. And it was probably about a year of occasionally bringing this topic up before I actually decided to do it, and took it upon myself to start doing Bible studies. And so I talked to my pastor, and this was when I just turned 13, and my pastor started to try to give me some Bible studies, but it wasn't really working, it wasn't really going ahead at all. And then my family and a few other people from our churches in Mackay in North Queensland, we went to Fiji for a mission trip. And my pastor, who was Fijian, actually got stuck out there with visa problems for like the next 10 months or something like that. I don't know. It was a little bit less than that, at least 6 months, I'm pretty sure. But while he was stuck out there, I was really starting to want to do Bible studies, and my one and only pastor in the entire city was gone. And so who was I going to do Bible studies with? So I ended up going online and finding a couple different Bible study guides just on the internet. And during my spare time, between classes, before school, like whenever I could, I would be doing my Bible studies by myself, just using the guided Bible study guides online. And then it turned out that my pastor managed to come back to Australia right at the end of the year. My family had already been called to be missionaries the following year in the Solomon Islands, and so about 2 months before we moved to become missionaries, I was baptized. I was baptized the day after my 14th birthday. And at that time, I'd just been getting really close to God. And it was a really special, really sweet sort of time for me. As I was doing these Bible studies and I was dedicated to doing it, I didn't have a pastor in the whole city to help me with doing Bible studies, but I was doing it anyway, and I was loving it, and I decided to get baptized. And it was in that period of time that one night I had a dream. And I woke up in the morning from this dream, and it was really simple. And the dream was just that I saw myself. And remember, I'm 13 years old when I'm seeing this in the dream. I saw myself looking much older, probably looking like I was at least in my 30s. And I recognized it as myself, but older. And I was standing on a stage and I was speaking, and there were spotlights on me. I couldn't see the crowd. But I woke up from that. First thing in the morning, I was like, whoa, I know 100% that this is my very first dream from God. And I prayed about it. I was excited about it. I asked God to actually confirm it for me. And I asked God to confirm it for me in a specific way. And I was all really, really excited. And he didn't confirm it to me in the way that I expected him to. The thing that I asked for never actually happened. And that was a little bit disappointing, and I didn't know what to do with that information, but I still really knew that God had given me this dream that I was basically preaching on a stage, and I knew it was somehow, a speaking, preaching kind of ministry sort of thing that God was showing me about my future. And then a couple of months later, we moved to the Solomon Islands, and we became missionaries for the next 2.5 years, and I didn't have anyone that I could tell about this. I didn't tell my parents about it. I didn't have a chaplain or a pastor or anyone that I could talk to about this. And I just held on to that. It was my little secret for probably at least 5 or 6 years, I would say. And I remember when I started university, and I was studying, that one of my friend's mum that would come to the university to watch her other son, one of my other friends, he would do violin, and she would come and she would record every single time he played violin. And I remember chatting with her and getting just getting friendly with her. And I told her that I had this dream and I felt like I was called to ministry of some description, something like that. And yeah, it was only after that I started to talk about it a little bit on a rare occasion. But I still hadn't had it confirmed to me in the way that I had expected. I didn't even know that asking for confirmation was a real thing, except for like the story of Gideon in the Bible. So I would turn 14, moved to the Solomon Islands. We spent a couple of years as missionaries. That was really important for me personally, to grow in my faith, to grow in my understanding of what it means to be a real Christian. And to have some real missionary experience. Like to me as a teenager in those formative years, I'm really appreciative of all the experiences that I had out there. I think it was really essential for me. And then we moved back to Australia when I was about 16, and then I felt like God was calling me to go to study originally outdoor recreation, which for me at the time was what I needed. And that's kind of a recurring theme in this story, is many little tiny stepping stones along the way for a very long period of time of things that God knew that I would need. And it wasn't just like, oh, God showed me when I'm 13 that I'm going to be a preacher of some description one day, and then the next day me actually doing that. That doesn't make sense. And he showed me in that dream that I was much older. I was probably at least in my 30s by the time this happened. Or that's what it looked like to me. I look like somebody middle-aged-ish, somebody much older than my teenage self, right? And yeah, so the next step along the journey was to study outdoor recreation, which is just hiking and like kayaking and going bushwalking, like camping, those types of things, like taking people around the place to do that sort of thing. And that helped me in one way. And then the next step that I needed to take was to actually start to study chaplaincy. And each of these steps along the way, God was speaking to me through other people generally, and them suggesting, hey, I really see that you should be going in this direction, or I see that you should be going in this direction. You have specific skills and aptitudes for this sort of thing. And I would pray about it. I would feel very strongly that, yes, this is the next step that God would want me to take. And it was actually in my first semester when I was studying outdoor recreation at Avondale University, Avondale College at the time, that one of the older, mature age theology students, so this is a guy who wasn't like 18 or 22 or anything, he was like somebody's dad. I actually know his daughter, she's a few years younger than me. And he pulled me aside, and we were chatting one day. We went to the same church at the time, and he was like, Lindsay, you're going to be a pastor one day. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I really see this about you. You have these types of skills. You understand this quite well. The kind of things that you say in discussion groups are like this. And I was like, no. And I just like freaked out at that idea. But I went home and I prayed about it for a while, and I felt at that point that God was calling me to study chaplaincy. So I finished up my first year, I did outdoor recreation, and then I started studying chaplaincy. And I took that rather slowly, and I took my time, and I'm really glad that I did, because it gave me time to grow up a little bit and get some life experience, and just to learn some things, and to heal from some trauma from the past. And then the next step that God showed me was for me to move to Melbourne, which most of you guys have probably heard about a few times here, and to work as a chaplain. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then the next step that God was calling me to quite clearly, usually using other people, was to work as a Bible worker in a local church setting, which I did in Melbourne. And I also was working at another local church as a children's pastor at the same time, like 2 part-time ministry jobs in 2 different churches. And then I felt very strongly that God was calling me to move to Brisbane. And so I moved to Brisbane, even though it was technically impossible for anyone to cross the border because of lockdowns at the time. And so God made that happen miraculously. And if you look at the video from last year, you can see how some of that happened. And yeah, I was here hanging around for a few months, and then the next thing that it seemed to be what God was calling me to do was to work as a Bible worker again in a local church here in Brisbane. That position wasn't even, it didn't even exist for me to apply for. It was something that just kind of was made up on the spot for me when I was there, which was really cool. And so I spent this year working in that position for most of the year until my contract came to an end. And I really learned a lot, and I grew a lot in that position as well. And each step of the way, God was calling me into this next thing, to learn a new thing, to grow in various different ways. And sometimes I would start a position and not actually get to the end of the contract for some of the positions that I did, like my chaplaincy. And when I moved overseas, actually, I skipped this step, when I became a volunteer missionary when I was in my early 20s. And yeah, I didn't finish that assignment, and I came back to Australia halfway through, and all these things. And sometimes I would feel like I had failed. I would feel like, you know, oh, I can't even make it to the end of this thing, and it's a ministry thing or whatever. But at the same time, I knew that God has a specific set timeline for my life. And sometimes those timelines don't actually match up with the timelines that we agree to on paper, and that everyone would like to have in this Western culture of, yes, you're going to work for 6 months, or you're going to work for 10 months, or you're going to work for 12 months or whatever, or 2 years or 3 years, whatever it is. And that's what the contract says. Sometimes God's timeline needs us to move outside of the timelines that we have set in human time. And so even though I felt like some of these times where I wasn't able to complete what I thought was what I needed to do and stick it out or whatever, and I felt like a failure or whatever, I knew that as I watched my life progress and the next things that God would show me, God was saying, okay, you've learnt enough in this position for where I want to take you down the track. I have something else that I need you to learn in this next situation. You've learnt enough there. All right, I'm going to pull you out of that, and you're going to go over here, and you're going to learn some skills over here, because I have bigger plans for you, and they're set on like a strict timeline. So we got to work together here. That's how I've understood the changes, the many changes that have happened in my life. I have moved already 23 times in 26 years, and very soon I will be moving 24 times in 27 years. That is coming up in a few weeks, because my life is changing once again, guys. So where I'm at now is, this year I was working as a Bible worker here in Brisbane. That contract has come to an end, and I've been waiting to see what God is going to do. In the meantime, I was actually called up out of the blue, basically, and offered to interview for a chaplaincy position, a very good position somewhere in New South Wales, and I would have to move like 10 hours away at least, and it would be an excellent position, but I really just didn't want to leave the life that I'd begun to build here. I have friends here, I have family here, I'm back in my beloved Queensland, I am a Queenslander through and through, and I just did not really want to go there. And so I interviewed for this position. I didn't apply for it, I was asked to interview for it, and they offered me the position, and I was like, I'd really rather not move. And that, as soon as I said that, the guy on the other end of the phone was like, no worries, we won't bother you then, we'll find somebody else, that's cool. And we hung up, and I sat there and I was like, did I just make a really stupid decision? Like, did I just turn down an excellent job just because I don't feel like moving? Is that really bad? And I had to sit with that. And I thought about it, and I was like, no, I still kind of feel peace about it. I think I've made the authentic decision for where I'm at in my life right now. I think everything will still be okay. But the next couple of weeks tested my faith and my trust in my own decision making, to be honest. And I was like, what am I gonna do? I don't really have any other options, and that would have been a really excellent option. And I have some friends who are questioning whether it was the right choice for me and why did I choose that? That's kind of silly. And I even texted them back and I was like, hey, I might have been foolish in making this decision. Is the position still open? And they were like, no, sorry. Unfortunately, I'm really sad that you regret your decision now, but we have given the job to somebody else. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. No worries. And I still had to sit with that. And I had to really think through, well, at least I know for certain that I really wanted to be here in Brisbane. And I found that even though I had been offered this interview and offered the job itself, it actually was a really good opportunity for me to reflect on where I wanted to be in ministry, where I wanted to be in my life. And God allows us to make decisions about these things. He's not going to force anything upon us. And I'm really glad I had that opportunity just to think about, do I want to move somewhere else? Do I want to stay here? What are these preferences? Because God actually works with our preferences sometimes. He doesn't force specific routes on our lives, right? And so I thought it through and I was like, yep, I think I made the right decision, but I still have no plans for the future. Like, I'm just doing Christmas casual work at the moment to make the ends meet at the moment. So I was like, financially, I made a big boo-boo probably, but that's okay. I'll be all right. I've been all right in the past. So this week, late last week, I got a phone call from some rather important people, and it was very much out of the blue. And they were like, hey, are you ready to just chat for a few minutes? And we had a 20-minute impromptu interview over the phone. And for backstory for this, earlier this year, so hold on, even further backstory, obviously. So in my first year at Avondale College, this older mature age student, he said, Lindsay, you're going to be a pastor one day. And I was like, don't say that, that freaks me out. And then I went into chaplaincy. And as the years went on and I'd see this older guy around sometimes, he would stop everyone around us. Like on Saturday at church, he would be like, hey guys, anyone who was listening, Lindsay's going to be a pastor one day. And I was like, what do you say? Stop saying that. Stop it. And he would just keep saying it. I was like, why are you saying this? Like, I'm not going to be a pastor. Anyway, so that happened a few times over the few years while I was at university. And yeah, only usually this one guy would say it and nobody else I could think of would actually really say that. And I felt like I was being called in the direction of being a chaplain, which is a bit different from being a pastor, although they're very similar. And yeah, so earlier this year when I was working at this church here in Brisbane, I had, in the space of 3 or 4 months, I had 6 different pastors say to me, essentially, Lindsay, are you planning to be a pastor one day? Have you considered doing that? And I was like, that's a lot of pastors saying that in a very short period of time. Maybe God is trying to say something to me. Maybe the time is now for me to actually start pursuing that direction, pursuing that calling that God has placed on my life back when I was 13 years old. And so after, 5 or 6 of them had said this, I was like, who should I talk to about, getting into a position of a pastor? And I spoke to one of the pastors who I'd been discussing with, and he was like, you need to call this guy at this office and just see if you can go and have a chat with him. Just sit down, tell him your calling, tell him sort of the journey you've been on, and see what can happen. Now, I haven't actually studied the correct degree to become a pastor. And so that's like a little spanner in the works for this whole situation. And yeah, so I ended up organizing this meeting with this guy, and I just told him really upfront, hey, look, I feel like God's called me to ministry. I don't particularly necessarily want to be a pastor, but it seems that's where God is calling me, and I can't ignore that. And this is how I feel about it, and sort of this is my plans with my life. There's not a lot of them, but this is where I'm at. And he was like, cool, thanks for letting me know. And so I was advised to slightly harass this guy and just call him once or twice a month and say, hey, just reminding you I'm here, and if you have a job, please let me know. And so I kept doing that. I showed my enthusiasm and my interest, and I didn't let up. And yeah, 6 months later, I had this phone call from this guy that I was chatting with and the big boss. And they called me up. They gave me my impromptu 20-minute interview last Thursday afternoon. And then I think it was probably, 3 or 4 days ago now. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. I don't know, something like that. The big boss, he called me and he was like, hey, I have a job for you. And I was like, oh, that's wonderful. Where is it? Where are we going? So basically I have to move an hour north from where I'm at on the south side of Brisbane to the north side of Brisbane. And I will be working as an intern youth pastor now. So that's pretty exciting for me, and it's so surreal because it's like been 14 years since God originally gave me this dream and this calling on my life. And it's finally sort of officially happening now. And it's just crazy. And with the education side of it as well, little bit backtracking. So I said a moment ago that I haven't done the exact right degree for this, and usually that would just completely cut out my my ability to be qualified for this position. But I've done similar enough classes for about half the degree. And back when I was finishing my degree, I spoke to one of my lecturers, and she was like, hey Lindsay, you are doing these 2 majors, chaplaincy major, religion major. If you pick some of the classes for this religion major, you will disqualify yourself from coming back to do the graduate diploma to become a pastor in the future. Are you sure you want to do that? But also, you have to pick those classes to complete that major. And I was like, yeah, look, I don't think I'm going to be a pastor one day. I think I'm just going to be a chaplain. And I had to make that hard, firm decision at the end of my degree. And so for part of this year, I was like, I'm not going to be able to be picked up as an intern pastor because I don't have the degree that I need, and I cannot get the degree that I need because that was decided a few years ago when I was finishing my degree, and I had to pick those specific units to finish the degree, which now disqualify me from going back to get the upgrade version to become a pastor. But the cool thing is, in the meantime, Avondale upgraded from being a college to a university, and they decided to upgrade their graduate diploma course in ministry and theology to a master's course, which means the handful of units, like they've just basically upgraded I have to do all the same classes I would have done for a graduate diploma, but now just do bigger assignments essentially. And so I spoke to the lecturer a few months ago, probably 3 or 4 months ago, and said, hey, I'm considering going down this path. I've talked to these people, and I'm just wondering if it's still the case that I would be completely disqualified from coming back. And she was like, you know what, we've just turned the diploma into a master's. Let me have a close look. But yes, your transcript says you've done these units, and those 3 units that would have kept you out of doing the diploma, we can actually just upgrade them. You just do 1 or 2 bigger essays. You don't even have to repeat the class for it. And it actually makes it easier for you to complete the masters. And I'm like, well, that's crazy. That's amazing. So I'm not disqualified. I am very much qualified, and I have been offered the opportunity to be 4 days a week a intern youth pastor, while the 5th day a week they want me to do my master's degree and complete that at some point in the future. So I will be doing that. That's my new path in life. I'm going to be a pastor and a student all at the same time, which is kind of crazy. So please keep me in your prayers. I'm not sure what this coming year is going to look like, but it's going to be a lot of ministry essentially, which I'm quite excited for. But it's also a really humbling thing to be called to. I've been reading through First Peter. I think it's First Peter. Hold on, let me just check. Been reading through Peter a bit recently, and he talks specifically to, is it First or Second Peter? He speaks a lot about First Peter chapter 5, shepherd the flock. So this is what Peter's advice is to elders, or pastors essentially is what they are referred to. So basically, when you read in the New Testament the word elder, it basically translates to pastor. Fairly good translation these days. There's some nuances in there as well. And he says, "The elders who are among you I exhort. I, who am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly, nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that does not fade away." So he says some other stuff as well, but basically he says this is what it means to be a pastor or an elder. It means to shepherd the flock, to really care for the people that God has given you in that local church community, as a shepherd cares for his sheep, watching out for them, feeding them good fresh grass, making sure they're not being attacked by wolves, making sure that they have plenty of water to drink, and that they're not overtired by walking around too much to find new pasture too often, or making sure that they're not being attacked by pests, and tending to their wounds and loving them, and being able to know, for them to be able to be called individually by name, having personal connection and relationships with each of these people, these sheep, right? So look after, so shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly. And an overseer is different from, there's a different passage in the Bible, which I don't know where it is off the top of my head, but basically it's contrasting being an overseer with somebody who is like an overlord, essentially. An overseer is somebody who is tasked with getting a job done, but just kind of gently guiding all the other people to accomplish this together as a group. So kind of being a group leader, right? And what are we trying to do? We're trying to be group leaders of people who are sharing the gospel with the world, right? So serving as overseers, group leaders, not by compulsion, not because you have to do it, but because you want to do it. That's where I am at the moment, mostly. I'm like, God, are you sure you want to pick me? I'm happy to do it. I know the realities of the job, but I'm happy to do it. Not for dishonest gain, not to just make money and sit around and do nothing, but eagerly, wanting to do it because you really want to do it, right? Nor as being lords over those entrusted, yeah, here it is, to you, but being examples to the flock, not being someone that has to, be worshipped, essentially, or, what's a lord? A lord would be somebody who, back in the old days, they would just have like a whole bunch of servants, and most of the people in the town would somehow be serving them. This is not about being served, but this is about serving others, right? And being an example to the flock. So when you're trying to teach Christian principles, you need to be living that out yourself, right? And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that does not fade away. That's pretty cool. So that's a little passage that yeah, I hope if any of you guys feel called to ministry, you check that out and you see what the Bible has to say about what is required of somebody who is being called into ministry. Um, it's definitely very humbling. Um, so that is all from me. Thank you for coming on this journey with me this evening. I will see you guys again next Friday. Bye.